A young makeup artist named Dick Smith revolutionized the craft of special makeup effects. Smith's inventive spirit and passion for realism evolved during his 15 years as the head of NBC's makeup department. His early feature film work was highlighted by transforming Dustin Hoffman into the 121-year-old Jack Crabb in Little Big Man.
I started doing makeup way back in 1945, and I got into television. There wasn't anything like special makeup effects in those days. It wasn't until I worked on The Exorcist in 1972, I guess it was, that there was even a call for the kind of change on camera that was required.
In the early 1980s, Dick Smith horror makeup kits were a regular feature in the advertising pages of magazines like Fangoria. And like any self-respecting teenage gorehound, I had to have one. According to the box, you could transform yourself into a monster or apply gruesome wounds and scars that looked incredibly real. One kit even allowed you to become a gorilla. This is the Overlooked Hotel, and this is the story of Dick Smith's Flex Flesh horror makeup kits. At the start of the 1980s, makeup special effects artists were finally becoming well-known figures thanks to the efforts of Fangoria magazine, which lauded these creatives with the same level of gushing praise that movie magazines had traditionally heaped on directors and actors. Many a reader was as fascinated with the process of creating gory effects and bizarre monsters as they were with the films themselves, and the market for home kits and instructional books was exploding. Before this, horror makeup kits tended to consist of a bit of grease paint, plastic vampire fangs, and blood capsules, and this sort of cheap and trashy novelty just wasn't going to cut it for the aspiring Tom Savini, who wanted to make Super 8 horror movies with ultra-realistic gore effects, and that was probably a large percentage of the Fangoria readership. And even if most people never actually got around to shooting those home movies and becoming the next Sam Raimi, actually at that point you might have actually been Sam Raimi as all this preceded The Evil Dead, then you could still have fun in creating horrible disfigurements and monstrous creations, thanks to the arrival of the Dick Smith horror makeup kits. The Dick Smith set was several steps ahead of anything that had come before. After all, Dick Smith was the master artist behind the gruesome visuals of films like The Exorcist, Scanners, The Sentinel, and The Godfather, amongst others. He clearly knew his stuff and had mentored many of the new generation of makeup effects greats like Rick Baker, and now he was going to share this knowledge with us snotty-nosed horror fans. Clearly, he wasn't going to lend his name to any old crap. His kits must be the real deal. What could possibly go wrong? Smith had, in fact, already given away his secrets, sort of, in a famous Monsters of Filmland special edition back in 1965 that taught kids how to transform themselves into basic monsters and aliens. He would later revamp the idea in a 1985 book and seemed genuinely happy to share his art and encourage a new generation of creators. But while the books were fun, the kits always seemed the way forward for the real enthusiast, given that they essentially contained everything that you needed to get started. The main selling point of the kit was a magical substance that Smith himself allegedly used to create scars, wounds, and other bodily disfigurements, a compound ambitiously called Flex Flesh, which was basically a gelatine-based powder that you had to mix with water and then put into various moulds, allowing it to set, at which point it would stick to your face, arm, or whatever body part that you wanted to look horribly damaged, blended into your skin with grease paint, and with the supplied bottle of stage blood poured over the wound, you were good to go. Flex Flesh, as the name suggested, was supposed to move with the body, look more like skin and flesh than the usual plastic scars that you could buy in joke shops. It all sounded pretty simple to do. It wasn't. Of the 3 Dick Smith kits available, I had the horror kit, which was more about the gore and less about creating monster faces. Not only did that one appeal to me more, but it also looked like it was going to be, of the 3, the most straightforward. Maybe it was in theory, but in practice it was very disappointing. Flex flesh may well have been suitably flexible if you did everything just right, mixing the powder with the water in the correct way and pouring it into the various molds for exactly the right period of time at exactly the right speed, and then using it and storing it according to the very precise instructions. If you got anything wrong, either in mixture quantity or timing, and in my experience that seemed to happen all the time, then the flesh had very little flex to it, not at all in fact, but instead came out of the assorted moulds in a rock-hard piece that you couldn't really glue to your face in any convincing or comfortable way, and frankly looked terrible. If you somehow got it right, then you still had to blend the prosthetic with the grease paint sticks included, though this too involved a rather steep learning curve for young boys who were not generally familiar with applying and blending makeup, especially not the rather basic theatrical set included here. While the photos on the box suggested that the creation of ultra-convincing scars, in truth you were more likely to be wearing a stiff bit of plastic that was surrounded by grease paint that in no way resembled either the scar or the wearer's skin. It was frankly very disappointing, and I can only imagine how nightmarishly complex the gorilla kit was, which seemed to involve creating an entire gorilla face and headpiece. The kit on the box made it look simple, but I can only imagine how nightmarish this was to actually do effectively. Did any of you have the gorilla kit? If so, did you get on with it? Let me know in the comments, and if you have photos, send them over to us. Also included in the horror kit was a pair of cheap joke shop vampire fangs, the sort of thing you could pick up anywhere for a pittance when you might well have expected something a bit more prosthetic and realistic, as well as assorted spoons and spatulas that made everything look jolly professional, but which inevitably were of no use whatsoever. The fangs and the rather crappy grease paint made the kit look cheap and nasty, far from the semi-professional product that the box had implied. When I first wrote about this some years ago, I was told stories of people who had some success with the kits. Not the gorilla kit though, and all I can say is good for them. I'm happy to hear of your own success stories in the comments, and you know what? I'd be happy to give these kits another go as a wiser, older, and slightly more patient adult. Though of course intact sets are rare and not exactly cheap. If you do have one lying around, feel free to donate it to the Overlooked Hotel cause, and I promise to do a follow-up video showing the results. But I suspect that most people were like me. Teenage boys who were not particularly good at measuring out precise quantities and following instructions to the letter, and soon tired of what was a laborious, frustrating, and ultimately rather boring experience that always looked terrible in the end. My kit was soon confined to a place under the bed alongside other disappointing toys until it was finally binned. If you enjoy these trips into the outer limits of cultural history, then please give this video a like, share it far and wide, and if you haven't done so already, subscribe. Every bit of engagement helps this channel grow and makes it possible for me to do more videos on a grander scale. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again soon.